Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadget Tech, and today I'm reviewing the 7hz Legato. This is from the same legendary company that made the 7hz Sound Note Zero, which was the ultimate $20 IEM for quite a long time, between the sound quality, tuning, comfort, all that good stuff. So the Legato is a very different IEM, both from a tuning, build quality, and price perspective. This sells for $110, so to me it puts it more in the premium entry-level category or mid-level IEM category. Just because there's so many good sub $50 IEMs on the market now, this is considered, to me, the next step up. Now, this was not sent to me from 7hz. This was sent to me by Linsole. They have a pretty amazing website, honestly, and they sell a lot of different brands. There was no monetary exchange of this for this review. I have no kickbacks, no marketing links in the description below. It's just a purchase link to take you to Linsole's website to find these in case you find this review helpful and you want to buy it. But I do not do my reviews to make money. So huge thanks to Linsole. Check them out. They have a great website, tons of selection and excellent pricing, and they ship fast, which is all really important. But anyway, that won't affect what I say about it. I just want to be, fully open and honest. So the name Legato, there's actually a meaning behind it, not just the fact that I always think of Domo Legato, Mr. Avato. I don't know if anyone else did that. But it basically means on sheet music for notes to be smoothly connected together, make it more seamless so there's not a jarring disconnect in the notes. And that does represent how this is tuned. It's a very smooth sounding IEM. Now the Legato uses dual dynamic drivers, and usually when you see that, it's pretty safe to assume it's going to have some bass. And that's definitely the case with the Legato. I'll get into sound quality here shortly, but it uses a 12mm woofer driver and a 6mm mid-range tweeter driver system. They also cross it over with a Japanese-based capacitor crossover, so it uses pretty high-quality components. And again, that's part of what you're paying for. It's not just, you don't just pay more for better sound quality. In this case, you're getting other components that are indicative of higher quality build materials, both from a long-lasting standpoint and obviously audible performance. Now for a cable perspective, it has a really nice cable out of the box, but it's like a darkish brown coffee color, almost like an espresso black. If you don't like that look, you can always change it. This uses a 0.78mm 2-pin connection, and it's an OCC cable, so it's a good cable, and I think the length is just right, whether you're using a DAP or putting something in your pocket. The cable's long enough for that, and if you're sitting at a laptop, you're good there. As far as build quality and design goes, the Legato is a very understated IEM. This has an aluminum shell and it feels really premium. You can see it's a two-piece design, and you can have you see the little vent right here, but it's not flashy. It's very monochromatic. You have the little Legato writing here on the side just above the cable, and it's clearly marked, which is something I actually really like. A lot of IEMs, they make it so difficult to clearly identify left and right, and the cable and the IEM itself is very easy to distinguish. Obviously, when you're familiar with IEMs, you can look at the shape and understand very quickly which IEM goes on which side, but I do want to point out the fact that it's clearly labeled. Now, there are a lot of things that come in the box, and I want to show you some cool things. So one, tons of different tips, and unlike some other IEMs, regardless of price range, these tips have different colors to them. So they have a different varying length and thickness, so depending on your ear shape, I strongly recommend experimenting with different tips, because for a while I used one pair of tips because I thought it fit well enough, and then I finally switched to the blues with the yellow cap or yellow inside bore, and it feels so much better, not only from a comfort standpoint, but I get much more consistent bass performance. So definitely try that. Now 7hz also includes replaceable grills and filters. This is obviously not necessary to switch out right off the bat, or in this case to be used for tuning. It's just if you ever have issues with it down the road or it needs to be cleaned out or swapped, you can do that. Now the case, I have to show you the case. I love this case. You might be looking at it and be like, holy crap, that thing is huge. And you're right, because once you have just IEMs, you really don't need a case this large. However, I love this case for one reason. And that's because when I travel and I use IEMs, I don't just travel with IEMs. I travel with either my Quidolix 5K or my XP2 Balance from X Duo. I reviewed that recently, so take a look in the description and related videos for that. But check this out. So when I open this case up, there is a pocket on the left side that's large enough even for a larger Bluetooth or USB DAC, such as the XP2 Balance. Or if, depending on what your gear is, maybe you have a dongle and a Quidolix 5K, like the Shio, for example. So you can fit all that in here, and then still put your IEMs on the side. Obviously, once you find the right tip, you don't really need to travel with the tips or even the filters anymore. So to me, this case is much more useful. Otherwise, I always have two cases, one for my IEMs and one for the DAP or DAC, whatever you're using. So I absolutely love that this is different. Now, as far as bore size goes, and this will affect comfort, I just want to point this out. So you have the outer edge of let's just say 6.2 millimeters, and then the inner side of that little lip after you put the tips over it is 5.6 millimeters. So it is a larger bore. Typically when you get a bass heavy IEM, or especially with a dual driver system like this, the bore size is a little bit larger. I usually don't like too large of a bore size because it does have some long-term discomfort issues. It actually kicks in as soon as like a half hour for me. However, these weren't too bad, and I think part of it came down to just finding the right tips to go with it, thanks to also in part of their ergonomic shape. Now these have some weight to them because of the metal shell. It's not an all plastic or resin based build. There's a little bit of heft to it, but because it's aluminum, it's not too bad. It may feel a little cool to the ear if you're traveling in cold climates or something like that. But overall, I found the comfort great, and I like the way they have the hook on the cable. Some IEMs have a much wider hook, and I don't feel like they ever have a proper grip on my ear. This one is a very delicate touch, and then when I wear them, I feel like it hooks around my ear just right to where I'm not like pulling on it and causing discomfort here, but it's snug for me. So these are one of the better fitting IEMs I own because of that. So when it comes to sound quality, let's start with objective measurements because there's no way to hide behind that. And as you can see, these are very bass forward IEMs. They have as much as a 14 decibel lift when you look at the lowest midpoint to the strongest bass note, which comes in at a subwoofer deep level of 33 hertz. The treble tuning is actually quite nice, and it's well suited for my preference because I typically do not like too strong of a 4 kilohertz region. As a result of this though, some guitars don't quite have the same sense of energy or ringing effect that you get with more forward IEMs, but nothing here is offensive, so don't expect something too sharp or sibilant to sneak up on you in various songs. Driver matching though, as you can see, is excellent, even with it being a two-way system. Now this is part of what you're paying for to get that kind of imaging performance because they're using those Japanese sourced materials for the crossover. So naturally you'd want driver matching to be excellent, and usually when you have a two-way system, there's a greater chance of driver matching to be a problem because now you have 4 speakers to deal with matching, not just 2. Now moving over to the subjective side, I'm going to start with something simple. Some of you, if you're listening to just the right hip-hop, rap, EDM song, you make that like kind of stink face, you get really into it, and that like the bass note is hitting just right, it's hitting hard. The Legato is your stink face IEM, and I say that in a good way. It has insanely deep bass and very strong, and at the same time it's pretty damn clean. Yes, it affects the tonality. This is not a neutral sounding IEM, but the bass that you're getting is not full of distortion or an incoherent presentation. It's tastefully done from a quality standpoint. It's just freaking strong. I don't know if food analogies are the right way to describe sound quality, but I think of the Legato as kind of like mashed potatoes, where they're kind of like thick and heavy and really smooth. This has that sound note. This is the mashed potatoes, but at the same time, it still has pretty good resolution. And now thanks to using a dual driver crossover bass system, they're not asking the higher frequency driver to carry all that extensive bass. So that driver is still performing well and producing a clean sound. As a result, the layering and detail retrieval is surprisingly good. To some people, it may not seem so up front because the bass is so forward. However, if you still try to listen to it from a technical or analytical level, you are still going to hear pretty good separation of instruments, vocals, etc., even on the most complex mixes. Now, as you saw, the mid-range is recessed and the treble is rather smooth. There's no like really extreme spikes or too strong of an elevation. It's emphasized enough to keep up with the bass so it doesn't sound like a mud box with nothing else going on. And you know, when it becomes more apparent is if you are the type of person who listens to a lot of stuff with pianos or deep male vocals, this will still sound fine. However, there is a sense of boxiness and heft that gets added typically more towards deeper male vocals than you get on female vocals. And at the same time, pianos sound heavier and they're not as forward in the mix. When you get into female vocals, the tonality of a female vocal isn't quite negatively affected the same way as the deeper male vocals are. However, they are still stepped back in the mix. So if you listen to someone with a more delicate voice, she'll still sound, or even a male if it has a lighter voice, It'll still be somewhat neutral sounding from a tonality standpoint, but not as forward as the heavier bass notes or even some of the treble that you're getting on other instruments in the song. Now, as shown in the measurements, driver matching is excellent. In fact, it's phenomenal. It's one of the better IEMs I've tested, even with it being a dual driver system. And as a result, when you get into the whole layering and textural improvements that you get from a good two-way system and the driver matching, imaging is excellent on these. I don't think the sound stage is overly wide. I mean, keep in mind it's an IEM. IEMs don't typically have a wide sound stage. However, it's a darker, deep sound stage. I actually still get some sense of depth, but because of the treble tuning, especially in that 10K region, it doesn't sound as vast or wide as some other IEMs that tend to air more on the side of air in more treble extension. Now, on the note of imaging and soundstage, I know a lot of you that watch my channel are also into gaming, or maybe if you're new to the channel, huge thanks by the way. When it comes to gaming performance, the Legatos are excellent in gaming. And if you want, especially if you play single player games or anything that you like having that immersive deep bass to, maybe you're using this for watching a lot of movies and you're watching Dune and you want that deep subwoofer effect that they're known for producing in those types of movies or games, the Legato is going to do that. I do like, just to be honest, on the heavier bass profile IEMs, I do like the BASN MTPROs just a little bit more for gaming, even though they're tuned to have less bass overall, but more bass carries into the mid-range. So it's just a different sound presentation. They also have a hotter treble in certain areas and also a darker treble in certain areas. They're a little bit different sounding, but I found that the way these stage for FPS, I enjoyed them just a little bit more. These being the Legato are a little bit too bass forward for me for FPS games. So if you're looking at it from a competitive level, I would go with something more neutral, but you can always EQ it. In fact, EQing bass down is probably the least detrimental thing you can do to an audio product when it comes to any EQ changes. So if you like the idea of the build quality, the comfort, the case, all of that other stuff, you can always just make a bass shelf and reduce it by however many decibels you want in, the sub 300 hertz range. So the Red is a very popular new IEM in the $50 range, and they are excellent. They are tuned exceptionally well from a tonality perspective. So if the idea of having too much bass or boxiness to male vocals or affecting pianos stepping back in the mix is a detriment to you, something like the Zero Red will give you a much safer tune. These are leaner sounding. You can always use this little impedance adapter that's included, and that's going to basically give you a stronger bass shelf by reducing some of the highs. So this is a good option at $50. It's a safer tune, again, if you're listening to all kinds of genres. However, this does not have the same resolution and separation and layering that the Legato is giving you. I find that the detail retrieval on the Legato is better just because of the quality of drivers and that crossover system, with this is also a two-way, by the way. But this one just has a little bit better resolution. Now, the last IEM I want to show in this comparison is the EA500 from Simgot. I also reviewed these in the past, and these chrome little fingerprint magnets are the opposite sound profile of the Legato. Where the Legato is strong in bass and somewhat darker in the mid-range and treble, is the opposite with the EA500. These have ridiculous resolution. I liked them because of that, because they have a unique take. I don't want every IEM to sound the same out there, otherwise, what's the point, right? So if you want something that's the opposite of Legato, or if you want a complementary set, this is going to give you a very different sound profile. It's very forward in the upper mid-range and treble. Image is nice, detail resolution, all that is excellent. It just doesn't have anywhere close to the same level of bass and depth that the Legato gives you. So that about wraps up the review. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful, and do not forget to like and subscribe. If you have been watching my channel, you'll notice my background is completely plain right now. I'm in the process of remodeling the studio and doing a lot more with audio, and I actually kind of like the plain look. So I am curious, if you made it to the end, what you think, or if I should put my headphones stuff or other things back there to jazz it up. But anyway, thank you again so much for the support. I'd love to see you at the next video. So with that being said, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.